She kicked the crutches out from under my wife, in front of 50 people, on purpose, and she smiled when she did it. You ever seen a predator misjudge their prey? Think they're going after something weak, only to realize they just picked a fight with a lion? Because what Karen didn't know, what not a single person at that HOA potluck knew, was that the woman she tried to humiliate in public had more legal power than the entire board combined. My wife isn't just tough, she's a judge, a sitting district judge. And the HOA president, she just committed assault in front of witnesses and 3 smartphones. So if you've ever wondered what happens when a petty tyrant pushes too far, keep watching. Because this isn't just a neighborhood dispute. This is what it looks like when justice lives next door. It started with cornbread. Yeah, that kind of story. We thought maybe, just maybe, if we brought something homemade to the HOA potluck, people would see us as neighbors, not outsiders. My wife Hannah had just had spinal surgery. She was recovering, slowly, using crutches, sometimes the transport chair when her back stiffened up. We had only been in the neighborhood 3 days. 3 days. And somehow, that was already long enough for Karen Langford, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, to decide we didn't belong. I wish I could tell you she whispered something petty or gave a passive-aggressive flyer about upholding aesthetics. That would have been polite, almost forgivable. But instead, she kicked the crutches out from under my wife, at a community picnic, in front of everyone. She didn't stumble into them, she kicked them, like she was swatting at a cockroach. And the sound of those crutches clattering against the pavement, it was sharp, cold. It sliced through the conversation, through the awkward laughter, through the "I'm just here for the burgers" crowd. And Hannah? She didn't cry out. She didn't scream. She caught herself with one scraped palm and just looked up, her eyes locked on Karen like a hawk spotting movement in the grass. Karen stood there, arms crossed, muttering something about fakers draining the community. Let me pause right here. If you've made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. Drop a comment if you've ever had an HOA Karen in your life, and subscribe, because this story's just warming up. And trust me, it doesn't end the way she thought it would. Because what Karen didn't know, what not a single soul under that gazebo knew, was that the woman she just shoved into gravel wasn't just my wife. She was also a sitting district judge. That's right. The woman who got pushed down in front of 50 witnesses and 3 smartphones had been appointed to oversee a multi-million-dollar fraud investigation involving, you guessed it, a certain local HOA. And suddenly, Karen's wedge sandal didn't just knock down a disabled woman. It kicked open the door to an avalanche she never saw coming. After the picnic incident, you'd think Karen might have backed off, even just out of self-preservation, but no. Karen did what Karens do best. She doubled down. The next morning, there was a bright pink violation notice taped to our front door. Crooked, of course, with one of those neon green HOA stickers that makes your stomach sink before you even read it. Improper storage of mobility device on porch. Mobility device. They meant Hannah's wheelchair. We didn't even have it blocking the walkway. It was tucked beside the swing under the eaves, right where she needed it. But to Karen and her army of laminated clipboards, it was apparently an unsightly obstruction. Or maybe just a reminder that not everyone fit her version of community beauty standards. Then came the newsletter. Full-color glossy paper with a letter from the president printed front and center. A passive-aggressive masterpiece. She wrote about the importance of maintaining a visually inspiring neighborhood and avoiding unnecessary medical theatrics in shared spaces. Unnecessary medical theatrics. Hannah read it once, silent, then folded the page, opened a spreadsheet on her laptop, and entered. Newsletter, violation of ADA tone guidelines, potential discriminatory language. Just like that, with the calm of someone who'd disbarred people before breakfast. She wasn't mad, she was building a case. Meanwhile, Karen kept walking around like a rent-free sheriff of a town nobody voted for, measuring porch steps, checking mailbox fonts, One afternoon, she even whipped out a literal level, and held it up to someone's garden flagpole. Our neighbor Trey, a retired civil attorney with the patience of a monk and a sarcastic streak a mile wide, leaned over his fence and whispered, "She's got more power complexes than the DM." That night, Hannah got a second violation notice for our ramp. Yep, the medically approved, city-permitted, ADA-compliant ramp was apparently not within approved community design standards. I laughed. Hannah didn't. She just said, "If she keeps this up, I'm going to need a second folder." And she wasn't joking. That ramp, she'd actually helped write the ordinance that made it legal statewide. I remember her reading the violation, pausing and saying, she just cited the wrong statute from the wrong county. Karen wasn't just overstepping, she was trespassing into legal quicksand. And the deeper she stepped, the more her little empire began to crack. See, HOA power can feel real big when no one pushes back. It's all about fear, fines, public shaming, rules that shift just enough to target whoever needs to be made an example of. But Karen, she didn't realize the woman she was targeting was quietly compiling a civil rights case, disguised as a neighborhood dispute. And it was about to get very real. The silent courtroom, building a case in the shadows. You'd never guess it, but the most dangerous room in our house that month was the dining room. Not because of clutter or a creaky chair or even our dog nearly knocking over a vase with his tail. No, because that's where Hannah turned silence into strategy. Every night, after dinner, she'd sit there, still in her socks, a mug of mint tea at her elbow, Crutches leaned gently against the table, and open what I had come to call the dossier. It started with a manila folder. Then it became a binder. Then it became a color-coded hyperlinked spreadsheet with a tab labeled probable violations /ADA/procedural/ethical. Me, I brought her snacks. She was preparing a civil liberties time bomb. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even emotional about it. She was surgical. Every letter from the HOA went into the file. Every passive-aggressive newsletter, screenshot, archived. Every conversation with a neighbor, logged, dated, anonymized. I once asked her how she could stay so calm while watching Karen walk around the neighborhood like she owned it. She sipped her tea and said, "Because ownership is a feeling, but law is a fact. Let me tell you, there is something deeply satisfying about watching your wife out-lawyer a tyrant without ever stepping into court. At least, not yet." And she wasn't just building a defense. She was preparing a map, one that traced Karen's patterns of abuse, HOA manipulation, and probable fraud, like a spiderweb stretching across every cul-de-sac in our neighborhood. Turns out, we weren't the only ones. That's when the doorbell rang. It was Trey, again. He brought over a flash drive and a sad little confession. A neighbor, an elderly woman named Yvette, had her mailbox ripped out by HOA contractors because it was too close to the curb that used a cane. She'd asked them to give her a week to fix it herself. Instead, they'd brought bolt cutters. Anna didn't say a word. She just turned to her laptop, opened a new folder, and typed in bold, EVET, potential elder abuse claim. That was the moment it changed. This wasn't just about us anymore. This wasn't about crutches or clipboards. It was about a culture of fear, a neighborhood trained to keep its head down. Hannah wasn't just collecting evidence now. She was building a coalition, quietly, discreetly, with precision only someone who understood the weight of due process could manage. She reached out to the state compliance board, filed background requests with the registrar, started drafting an inquiry to the ADA office regarding pattern violations. And she still made time to water the tomatoes. That's the thing about my wife. People mistake her calm for weakness. But they forget, she sits in judgment every day. She knows how truth works in silence. And while Karen was busy barking into megaphones, Hannah was whispering into the ears of institutions that don't blink. You know that old saying, never start a war you don't understand? Karen? She just declared war on a sitting judge. And court was about to come to her doorstep. Friday night, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, lukewarm lemonade. On paper, it was just another HOA meeting at the clubhouse. In reality, it was Karen's last stand, and she didn't even know it yet. She strutted in like she was running for office, clipboard in hand, laminated code book tucked under one arm like a sword, and a stack of official community conduct notices in her tote bag like ammunition. The place was packed. More neighbors than we'd ever seen. Some had come out of sheer nosiness. Others because they'd finally had enough. And us? We sat near the back. Hannah in her charcoal blazer, no robe, no titles, just a quiet presence, and a folder that had more legal weight than Karen's entire binder of threats. Karen cleared her throat and opened with the usual speech. We are gathered here today to restore order, to uphold our shared values, to address the disruptive behavior threatening our harmony. Classic Karen. She dripped with authority she didn't actually have. Then she gestured to us, without naming names, and began listing our infractions. Unauthorized accessibility ramp, improper porch decor, non-participation in beautification days. Beautification days. We'd lived here 3 weeks. Then, like the final scene in a bad reality show, she declared that a vote would be held. A community vote on whether to begin disciplinary action against the troublesome elements. Someone in the crowd laughed, loudly. It was Trey. Karen shot him a look. He shrugged and said, "Go ahead and try. I brought popcorn." And then Hannah stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just calmly, like it was her turn to speak in court. She walked to the front with her crutches, handed Karen a packet of paper, and turned to the crowd. "My name is Hannah. I'm your neighbor. I'm also a district judge." Silence. "Tonight, I'm not speaking as a judge. I'm speaking as someone who moved here looking for peace, and instead found abuse of power, financial manipulation, and the intimidation of vulnerable residents." She then gestured to the packet copies for everyone. Inside, a timeline of Karen's overreach. Screenshots of the ADA violations. Financial discrepancies linked to Karen's cousin's fake landscaping company. Eyewitness statements. And a copy of the letter Hannah had submitted to the state attorney general's office. The room went. Even the air conditioner paused. Karen tried to interrupt, but Hannah didn't even look her way. "You can vote tonight if you want," Hannah said, "but know this. There's a formal audit coming, and everything that's been hidden behind those clipboards, it's coming into the light." Someone clapped. Then 2 people. Then the whole back row stood. Karen tried to gavel it down, but the gavel cracked in half. Literally. Karen pointed to some driver in the crowd, or maybe it was from Dollar Tree. That night didn't end with a vote. It ended with neighbors coming together for the first time in years. People shared stories. One woman cried while describing how she'd been fined for putting wind chimes near her disabled son's window. Another man handed Hannah a flash drive with security footage. Karen slunk out the side door. And just like that, the power shifted. By Saturday morning, the neighborhood wasn't whispering anymore. It was buzzing. People who used to smile politely at Karen on their morning walks were now walking in the opposite direction. And those flyers she passed around accusing Hannah of disrupting community harmony? They were lining bird cages and trash bins by noon. But what really lit the fuse was the paper trail. Trey, our neighbor and retired civil attorney, dropped off a folder. He said it came from someone who used to sit on the board before Karen forced them out. Inside were budget sheets, transaction records, and an HOA maintenance log that looked like it had been written by a toddler with a crayon. Hannah poured herself some coffee, sat on the porch, and started sorting it all out like a quiet storm. Who the heck is Silver Fern Group? I asked, squinting at one of the invoices. Karen's cousin, she said without even glancing up. Turns out this company billed the HOA for $75,000, 0 cents, in landscaping services for a single patch of mulch around the community fountain. And that fountain, it hadn't worked in over a year. There was more. $18,000, 0 cents, in security upgrades that consisted of a single $89, 0 cents camera mounted sideways on the clubhouse. $6,200, 0 cents for holiday festivities. And nobody in the neighborhood remembered any actual festivities. Hannah's keyboard became a percussion instrument of justice. By Monday, she had compiled a full report. Timeline of financial discrepancies. Breakdown of board conflicts of interest. Copies of county zoning documents proving Karen overstepped her authority on multiple properties. And then came the quiet clicks of forwarding emails to the state auditor, district attorney, housing regulatory board, and oh yes, 3 investigative journalists. Not out of revenge, but out of civic duty. Later that week, one of the reporters replied. They were running a Sunday expose titled, "The Clipboard Queen, Inside the Fraud of a Suburban HOA." You should have seen Karen's face that afternoon. She tried to go on her usual patrol, but only made it halfway down the street before turning back around. No clipboard, no smile, just tension. And then it got worse. That Thursday, a black SUV rolled through the gates. Government plates. 2 agents stepped out and knocked on the HOA office door. It wasn't a wellness check. They stayed inside for over an hour. Took photos. Walked out with a stack of files and Karen's HOA-issued laptop. That night, a notice went out to all residents. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the HOA meeting scheduled for next week is postponed indefinitely. Yeah, unforeseen circumstances. And just when Karen thought she might weather the storm, she got a certified letter in the mail with a court seal on the envelope and the name on the docket, Judge Hannah T. Wells. Yeah. The storm wasn't coming. It had already arrived. The irony didn't hit her until she stepped into the courthouse and saw the seal on the wall. Not the HOA seal she plastered on every newsletter, no. The real one. The one carved in stone above the bench Hannah now sat behind. Yep. Karen Langford, self-appointed queen of hedges and HOA fines, was now standing in a courtroom in front of the very woman she had tried to humiliate with a sandal. The bailiff called order. Hannah's robe was crisp. Her hair simple. No jewelry, just a small bracelet I gave her on our 5th anniversary. Being harassed, she looked calm. But I've learned something about Hannah. The calmer she looks, the more likely someone's about to get legally vaporized. Karen's attorney, a nervous man with too many papers and not enough poker face, started with the usual noise. Your Honor, we believe this hearing is biased. Judge Wells has a personal history with my client. Hannah didn't blink. Motion acknowledged. Recusal was already reviewed and denied by the ethics board. Please proceed. That was it. No emotion. Just justice. Witnesses came forward one by one. Mrs. Ivatt with photos of her mailbox being ripped out. A young father who paid a $1,200 0-cent fine for a sandbox in his yard. Trey with printouts of emails, invoices, HOA financials that read more like a crime novel than a budget. Then came the forensic accountant. He dropped a bomb. $184,000, 0 cents, of community funds routed through shell companies, 2 of which were registered to Karen's cousin and a childhood friend from Zumba class. Karen visibly shrank in her seat. Her attorney whispered something. Karen stood and tried to interrupt, claiming this was all character assassination by bitter residents with personal vendettas. Mrs. Langford, Hannah said calmly, this is not a potluck. You may sit down and let your counsel speak. Silence. Even the courtroom air conditioner stopped humming. Then came the final twist. Hannah produced an HOA charter addendum signed and notarized by Karen, proving she had illegally annexed homes into the HOA without full consent, meaning dozens of families had been fined, cited, and harassed under rules that never applied to them. Karen's face froze. Her lawyer slowly lowered his pen. By the time the gavel struck, the courtroom wasn't clapping, but the air buzzed. You could feel it. The shift. From fear to reckoning. The verdict wouldn't come for another week. But Karen didn't wait. She disappeared from the neighborhood the next morning. What she didn't realize is that she hadn't just lost the courtroom. She'd lost control of the board, of the narrative, of the people. And soon, even her house wouldn't be hers anymore. They say you can't change a neighborhood overnight. But sometimes, all it takes is one woman standing up, crutches and all, to remind people they still have a voice. A week after the courtroom showdown, the for sale sign went up on Karen's lawn. No ceremony, no warning, just a quiet moving truck and a final walk of shame. The wedge sandals clicking down the driveway like a deflated parade. The clipboard? Gone. The laminated flyers? Recycled. The empire of fear? Evaporated. That Saturday, something changed. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid each other now shared coffee. A single mom mowed an elderly neighbor's lawn without being asked. A kid left a toy truck on the sidewalk, and nothing happened. No fine. No photograph. Just a wave and a chuckle from across the yard. And then came the vote. The HOA board, once stacked with Karen's cronies, was dissolved in a landslide election. Oversight committees were formed. The books were opened, and for the first time in years, residents actually showed up to meetings, smiling. Trey, now elected as president, stood under the old community sign and made the announcement. Effective today, we are no longer the Willow Reserve HOA. This community belongs to its people again. Welcome to Liberty Grove. The cheers? You'd think we just won a small war. And in a way, we had. Hannah's ramp, the one Karen called an eyesore. It was now flanked by hand-planted flowers from neighbors who wanted to make it beautiful, the right way. The clubhouse Karen once used for HOA tribunals? Now it hosted game nights, bake sales, and even a kids' puppet theater. People stopped living in fear and started living. And Hannah? She didn't ask for a parade. Didn't expect a plaque. But at the next community BBQ, someone handed her a little wooden sign, hand-carved by a local teenager who used to get fined for skateboarding. The judge who brought us back. She smiled, placed it gently near the ramp and said, "Let's just keep moving forward." Karen faded into rumor. Liberty Grove thrived. And somewhere between broken rules and blooming flower beds, a neighborhood found its soul again. There's something poetic about the sound of a cane tapping softly on concrete. Not in defeat, but in defiance. That's the sound I hear every morning now. As Hannah walks slowly along the sidewalk, one step at a time. Past freshly painted fences. Past neighbors waving and smiling. Past the spot where she once lay, bleeding on gravel, while a crowd froze. But this time, she's not alone. Everywhere she goes, she carries the quiet respect of a community rebuilt. A nod from the retired veteran across the street. A thank you wave from the single mom whose fines got erased. A handmade card taped to our door from a 9-year-old that says, "Thank you for helping my grandma keep her house." We never set out to become the center of anything. We just wanted a quiet home by the pond. But somehow, the woman they tried to humiliate, the woman they mocked, fined, and kicked while she was down, became the mirror that made the whole neighborhood see itself clearly again. And she never raised her voice, never made it personal, and just stood up. Slowly, one legal citation at a time. One witness, one fact, one truth. That's the thing about strength. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it walks with a limp. Sometimes it shows up in a court of law wearing a plain blouse and a quiet smile. Sometimes it grows in silence until the whole world hears it. And as for Karen, she left quietly. No apology, no closure. Just packed her rage into cardboard boxes and drove out of a neighborhood that no longer feared her. We still hear rumors about the lawsuits, the hearings, the job applications that keep getting denied. But in Liberty Grove, we stop talking about Karen. We talk about the woman who walked through fire without bitterness, as we talk about what comes next. And every morning when Hannah steps down our ramp, when she plants her garden or waves to a neighbor's kid riding a scooter past her flower beds, I'm reminded that justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears bandages on its palms. Sometimes it limps. But it always, always stands back up. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own home, if someone tried to break your spirit with fines, gossip, or fear, remember this: you are not alone. And sometimes the strongest step you'll ever take is the one after they try to knock you down. If this story spoke to you, share it, like it, comment your story below. Let's keep building a world where empathy, truth, and quiet strength lead the way.